Noam Chomsky, Profit Over People, Neoliberalism and Global Order. Dive into the intricate world of neoliberalism with Noam Chomsky's Profit Over People. In this compelling analysis, Chomsky unravels the effects of free market capitalism on global societies, exposing the underlying power dynamics and socio-economic implications. This book challenges the rosy promises of neoliberalism by showcasing real-world consequences, from the infamous Washington Consensus to U.S. interventions across Latin America. Moreover, it explores how global institutions like the WTO shape the economic playing field, offering the U.S. formidable influence over international affairs. As you journey through this summary, anticipate revelations about how trade agreements such as NAFTA have reshaped economies, but not always for the better. Ultimately, Profit Over People is a critical examination of how economic policies often prioritize the powerful over the collective good, providing a wake-up call for those interested in the true costs of market liberalization.
Neoliberalism's hidden costs. Neoliberal capitalism presents itself as the champion of freedom and choice, advocating for a hands-off approach where governments allow the free market to dictate everything from prices to wages. On the surface, this is an attractive proposal, but delving deeper reveals a narrative fraught with uneven realities when these ideals clash with the complexities of the global economy. Consider the Washington Consensus, developed by the U.S. and international financial powers. It advocated for widespread market reforms like trade liberalization and inflation control, creating an almost universal call for governments to retreat and let markets thrive. The expectation was to spark growth in developing countries. However, these strategies often resulted in more harm than good, giving rise to critiques that portray these institutions as an unofficial world government imposing a new kind of imperial control. Take, for instance, post-World War II America, whose economic boom positioned it as a global leader. The U.S. crafted a system that favored its interests, notably in Latin America, where regimes aligned with revolutionary or nationalistic values were seen as threats. Such governments aimed to uplift living standards and respond to developmental needs, but this clashed with the free market demands of America, which prioritized its own economic interests. This conflict of interests led to U.S.-backed interventions in Latin America. The 1973 coup in Chile, which removed democratically elected Salvador Allende, serves as a stark example. His focus on socialist policies and prioritization of social welfare was unpalatable to U.S. interests. Similarly, the 1954 overthrow of Guatemala's President Jacobo Arbenz, who advocated for agrarian reforms, highlighted how American agendas crushed democratic and pro-populist measures. The 1980 support for the Contras in Nicaragua further illustrates this trend, as the U.S. sought to destabilize the Sandinista government, which placed societal welfare above capitalist pursuits. These actions underscored a preference for protecting business interests over democratic principles and the well-being of local populations. This neoliberal openness to free market ideas isn't exclusive to the Americas. Britain, after centuries of protectionism, embraced this economic ideology while still managing to protect its own industries. The tale of India's iron industry is a case in point. Once a global frontrunner, India's iron sector crumbled under the weight of free market policies. Britain flooded India with cheap iron and steel, stifling local production and hindering India's manufacturing growth due to restrictive trade policies. As a result, India experienced crippling deindustrialization, becoming economically tethered to Britain, which profited significantly from this strategic subjugation. In essence, neoliberalism serves power and profit more than the collective well-being it purports to champion. There's an urgent necessity to re-evaluate these doctrines through a lens that considers historical contexts, real-world impacts, and the diverse interests of global populations. Crafting a future that genuinely prioritizes the collective needs of humanity demands moving beyond the narrow interests of policy architects and powerful stakeholders. Recognizing and addressing the inherent imbalances in neoliberal practices can pave the way for a fairer, more inclusive vision of economic relations worldwide. The WTO's invisible hand. Over the years, a significant shift has occurred in how global powers like the United States influence the world stage. Once, the United Nations served as the primary arena where these nations promoted their values and interests. However, it was never as democratic as it appeared. The US and similar heavyweights used it to project their influence robustly. Today, attention has turned towards the World Trade Organization, WTO, a platform tailor-made for the US to flex its economic strength. The organization's focus on trade policies and its powerful dispute resolution system gives it an edge over the diplomatically centered UN. The WTO has evolved beyond a mere hub for trade negotiations. It now plays a crucial role in forging global economic norms, with the United States successfully embedding its free market principles into international agreements. The telecommunications agreement within the WTO highlights the US's extensive leverage. Ostensibly, this agreement aims to create a balanced global telecom landscape. In reality, it allows the US to influence internal policies of other nations. For countries with tight restrictions on foreign investment in telecoms, the US can press for reduced regulations through this agreement. This isn't just a suggestion. The US can insist on reforms in the legal and operational frameworks of these nations, ensuring that American businesses can invest with ease and pursue their interests unhindered. This aggressive approach has already seen results, with various countries being pushed to liberalize their telecom sectors. While this might champion free market ideals, it often leads to US and other global companies gaining considerable influence over another nation's communications infrastructure. The consequences of such developments are profound. Local telecom industries frequently experience increased foreign dominance, squeezing domestic companies out of the market. Furthermore, it raises critical concerns about the host country's control over its essential systems. While certain economic benefits might be realized initially, the broader effects on local enterprise competitiveness and national independence remain uncertain and potentially troubling. Rules of engagement. At the heart of international relations lies the tale of uneven rules, where the United States often writes its own script for global cooperation. Exuding a selective multilateralism, the US champions global cooperation through trade, promoting frameworks like the World Trade Organization, yet often bypasses its own doctrines with issues like climate change or geopolitical conflicts. A stark illustration of this selective approach is visible in the 1980s Nicaraguan conflict. During a time of revolutionary fervor in Central America, Nicaragua's socialist Sandinista government was seen by the US as a threat within the familiar but largely disproven domino theory lens. In response, the US backed the Contras, a counter-revolutionary force, igniting a conflict that tore through Nicaragua. This involvement led Nicaragua to an unprecedented move, bringing the United States before the International Court of Justice, ICJ, for violating international law by supporting insurgencies. The ICJ ruled against the United States, marking a historic verdict, which the US promptly dismissed, rejecting the court's jurisdiction. This act underscored America's tendency to embrace international law selectively, eroding the credibility of global institutions and casting a stark light on its approach to democracy and international legislation. This pattern of behavior is not exclusive to Nicaragua. For over 6 decades, the US has maintained a stringent embargo against Cuba, ostensibly to impose change, while defying the international community's consensus that deems the embargo illegal. Meanwhile, Cuba, enduring significant socio-economic hardship under this embargo, continues to uphold its ideals, offering humanitarian aid worldwide despite its struggles. Such narratives reflect deeper themes that surface repeatedly in international discourse. The proclaimed values of free trade and democracy often disguise their underlying motive, to serve the interests of the powerful. The saga unfolds repeatedly, whether through Thatcher's policies in Britain, international telecom battles at the WTO, or America's assertive policies in various global theaters. In essence, these are stories where economics tightly interlock with geopolitics, power, and control, shaping the world scene in a dynamic and often contentious dance of influence. Consequences of promised prosperity. In the early 1990s, the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, was introduced with grand promises of economic growth and prosperity for the United States, Mexico, and Canada. By eliminating trade barriers and enhancing investment opportunities, it was anticipated to uplift all three nations. However, the reality painted a very different picture, particularly for Mexico, where the impact was severe. With the implementation of NAFTA in 1994, Mexico was thrust into a dramatic economic restructuring, deeply affecting its agricultural sector. Flooded with cheaper, U.S. government-subsidized corn, Mexican small-scale farmers found themselves unable to compete, leading to widespread loss of livelihoods. Consequently, Mexico's dependency on food imports surged, and from 1990 to 2000, the rural areas saw a nearly one-third increase in extreme poverty rates. As agriculture shifted towards exports and animal feeds, Mexican consumers faced escalating malnutrition, highlighting the destructive imbalance the agreement fostered. The repercussions of such policies have been profound, systematically favoring the affluent while marginalizing others and undermining democratic values and human rights globally. Yet, resistance emerged forcefully in 1994, when indigenous peasants in Chiapas, Mexico, launched the Zapatista uprising on the very day NAFTA took effect. This bold movement boldly challenged historical injustices by seizing cities and towns, demanding rights to land, cultural preservation, and self-determination. Remarkably, the Zapatistas were pioneers in using the internet to rally global solidarity, setting a precedent for modern advocacy movements. Their resistance compelled negotiations with the Mexican government, securing substantial regional autonomy and kindling global awareness about indigenous rights. Though the system remains intact, the Zapatista movement stands as a testament to the power of collective resistance, offering hope for disadvantaged communities worldwide. Thus, the story of NAFTA serves as a powerful reminder of how neoliberalism's advocacy for free market capitalism often exacerbates socio-economic disparities on a global scale.
As you close the chapter on Chomsky's Profit Over People, take with you the key insights into neoliberalism's far-reaching impacts. The book unveils the hollowness of free market rhetoric when confronted with real-world outcomes, where the pursuit of profit often trumps democracy and human well-being. From decimating local industries and imposing economic imbalances, to the US's selective adherence to international norms, the narrative underscores a persistent theme: economic policies are frequently tools of power that exacerbate inequality. Yet, hope emerges in the form of resistance movements, like the Zapatistas, who fight for dignity and change. Chomsky's work not only critiques the status quo but also urges readers to imagine a future where economic systems serve the many, not just the privileged few. It's a rallying cry for critical evaluation and collective action towards a more equitable global order.